Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Like and subscribe.
Hi, welcome to the Sit, Walk, Work podcast, a show about paying attention. My name is Dominic, your host, and today's episode is a standalone guided meditation designed to give you an opportunity to practice pretty much wherever you are. So when you're ready, the practice will begin shortly after the following chimes. Here's your weekly attention practice to accompany today's meditation. Throughout each day this week, repeatedly ask yourself, how will I be a contribution in this moment? In the morning, set the intention to remember this question throughout your day. As you move about the day, whenever you notice yourself feeling stuck or frustrated, judging yourself or others, focusing on what you might get or what you might achieve, caught up in comparison or measurement, simply ask yourself, how will I be a contribution right now? Then take a deep breath and let the question work on you. The goal isn't to force an answer here, but it's kind of to let the possibilities bubble up and emerge on their own. In the evening, reflect back on how this question may have shifted your experience during the day, or kind of how things went with working with this new behavior. I like this one because the way this works is that this simple question begins to move you away from the idea of the measurement world. Am I good enough? How can I give? What can I offer? It shifts you from scarcity to abundance thinking, helps you to see others through the lens of possibility, transforms your problems into opportunities for contribution, and connects you to your unique gifts and your presence. It's not a requirement to really do anything different each day, other than to work with this one question as your companion. Notice how it evolves and deepens throughout the week. It may take you a couple of days to get used to actually asking yourself this question, so give yourself a bit of grace and a bit of patience and work with it. Again, the mantra is, how will I be a contribution? And that's it. One question, 7 days, infinite possibilities. Whether this is your first time or your 100th time, the practice is the practice. That's the lovely thing about meditation, is it meets you exactly where you are. And so for folks who are joining us for the first time, just a quick disclaimer, this is a non-movement practice. So you're not going to be doing any physical movement for the time we're together today, which is about 30 minutes roughly. And so we'll take this practice seated or lying down. So right now, if you're not in that position, make yourself comfortable in a place where you're not going to be moving a lot for the next 30 minutes. The other parameter I would give is make sure you can breathe. So don't contort your body or put your torso in a shape or a position that's going to affect your breathing. You want to be able to clearly breathe. We use the breath as a major component to the practice. So being able to take a good breath in will make the practice a little more manageable for you. And then our hands, put them somewhere where they're not going to be distracting, especially as we work through practice. Sometimes that's the way we can kind of dissipate nervous energy. And so letting the hands be still in some capacity is also nice. Lying by your side, resting in your lap, resting on a table in front of you if you're at your desk or something. All of that kind of works to just let the hands settle. You've kind of got yourself in a comfortable position. The final cue I would give around this would be to close the eyes if it feels safe. Keyword is if it feels safe. If it does not feel safe to you, you can take this practice with eyes open. You just want to let your visual field kind of rest on something that isn't going to distract you further from your practice. So a soft gaze out slightly in front of you with the eyes opened is okay. Otherwise, close the eyes, and I think we are in a place where we can start to open up to what we're going to work on today in practice. I've been reading. I read a lot, and been reading the book The Art of Possibility, and it had some interesting themes in it, and I want to explore those a bit in meditation today. So as we go through the meditation, just know that's kind of where the inspiration for what we're working on today comes from. Take a moment and orient yourself to where you are in this space right now. And so what that actually means is hear what you hear, kind of notice what you feel in your body. That could be your breath, or that could be how the body, aches, pains, general stuff that you brought into practice. Other things to kind of notice just softly is notice the quality of your mind. I like to say this often in practice that our mind can take on these certain qualities and themes, and I think you kind of know that, especially when we call them moods, right? You're in a good mood or a bad mood or whatever mood you happen to be carrying. So kind of notice what's just with you right now as we start off practice. It's good to kind of acknowledge that. Something else to keep in mind is that there is no right answers to the test here. This practice is about being curious and exploring what's happening in the moment, how that feels, what you think about it, and how that affects your breath and just your overall experience. So don't feel bound to something needing to be some kind of way. This is your time just to kind of sit and be in a neutral witnessing perspective. And it can be a little noisy in there, is what I like to say. When we start sitting to pay attention to what's going on, there can be a lot going on, especially with the mind and sometimes with the body too. It just kind of depends on each individual. And so as we start to narrow our focus and harness that to any one specific thing, do keep in mind that there will be points of distraction along the way. And I will simply ask you to return back to what you're focusing on in the practice and to meet those moments with patience and ease and a bit of compassion for just our general experience. Let's begin to settle into our breath and start to notice our breath a little more closely. There's a couple ways you can do that. In noticing the breath, you can feel it just moving the body itself with each inhale and each exhale. But you can also follow it from its point of origin, whether that's breathing through the mouth or through the nose. But notice where your inhale starts, then follow it down and into the belly or chest and feel it expand. And then feel the cycle reverse as you exhale and things contract in and you breathe out. Seeing if we can loosely hold the attention on the breath, moving in, moving out. You can even begin to feel the rhythm of the breath, the rising and falling nature of that breath. You might even witness and notice that as you breathe in right before your exhale starts, as you take all the air in, you can feel a slight pause that occurs at the top of the breath. before the next cycle comes through. So see if you can notice that for the next 2 to 3 breaths. The breath metaphorically always represents the possibility. It opens us up to the next opportunity by its returning. It is potential, it is the energy that it needs to be taken in order for us to do the things that we look to do in our lives. And on the backside of that, it's the exhale, it's the release, it's the getting to put it down for a moment. If the mind wandered away, got lost in thought, or some other thing that seems more pressing in the mind, it's tugging at your attention. Notice that and patiently bring yourself back to connecting with the breath. As we come into practice and we slow down and start to pay attention to the breath, it can be a stark contrast. We've spent most of our day in a world that is driven off of the idea of measurement. We're constantly being measured against something or against someone in just about every single activity we encounter. And because of that, with it, I should say, that we get the added stress of needing to try to make and or have things be a certain way. And stepping into practice right now, it's a little different because here the goal is to minimize the measurements and just to kind of notice what's happening in each moment. And I'd like to take this idea and just give it a bit of our attention. And so consider something either today or recently that happened, maybe a challenge at work or some relationship difficulty or challenge that occurred. And I want you to bring that idea, that thought into your mind and notice the ways in which this idea of measurement applied to it. This idea of whether or not we're succeeding or failing or doing it right or doing it wrong, how that kind of shows up in its own way. Giving space in this moment of reflection to not only just kind of be here thinking through or visualizing through what I'm pointing your attention towards. Notice how it feels too, that there can be a weight associated with that, a physical embodiment of it. and that you can kind of overlay the breath here. Let that exhale act as a bit of a relief valve. And it's interesting because as we kind of look at the things that we measure ourselves against, just see how that shows up. There's also inherently this idea of a story that's built in around those same things. There's a reason for the measurement to be a certain way. There's a reason we need it to be good or try to avoid it being bad. There's some underlining story that we've been told or we've just assumed and picked up along the way. That kind of adds to the energy here. And any point along the way, if the mind gets distracted, remember that the breath kind of brings us back. We do a lot of starting over in our practice. We call it beginning again. And there's permission for that to exist. What kind of measuring ideas we've encountered today and what and how those have landed within us. And that if there's a story around those that we're holding, what if we started to reframe that to allow a different perspective to enter the space? How could or how might that be? If there's assumptions present that we're holding over a situation, or reasons you've said why things couldn't be a certain way in this practice, in this moment, what if you allowed yourself to explore something slightly different? Attempting to align it with something that feels more natural, maybe a little less heavy. Instead of trying to find the right one. When we allow for the possibility of us to influence the way we see or the way we kind of hold things, new ideas given the freedom to arise in the moment. Beginning to allow your attention to redirect towards kind of what's going on in the body more so than the mind. And this, in the same way I asked you to observe the breath, we bring our attention into the body and notice where you feel sensation, whether those sensations are correlated with a certain line of thinking or just naturally occurring. You've already felt the breath here, but what else is present? Being mindful not to get lost in the measurement of what sensations, what you think sensations should be, rather than what they just are. As we kind of sit here in what we call open awareness, paying attention to the body, you might notice that the flow of that attention can kind of move because sensations move. You might feel something for a period of time in one location of the body and then have it dissipate and reappear as something new somewhere else. And as you're sitting with the moment and watching the various sensations arise and change and move, come and go, I've asked you throughout practice to try to do that in a way that was kind and patient and curious. And the ask and the reason I ask for that is in this way we're giving ourselves permission to already have done the practice correctly. We've given ourselves an A in the world of our measurement. It's not something that we have to work towards. It's something that is already ours. It doesn't mean that everything's great. Doesn't mean that everything feels good. It just means we're human and that the potential to do good exists. So notice how it feels to give yourself the permission to have done this practice perfectly okay. Bringing our attention back to where we started practice, back to the feeling of the breath, anchoring our focus on the breath, the receiving, the pausing, the holding, the releasing, and the process beginning again. Your breath is and always will be your practice. It is reflective of everything you've done today. You've taken in, you've witnessed, you've held a little bit, you let it go, you start it over again. Drawing the attention back, if it wandered off, got lost in some other pattern of thinking. Giving yourself the opportunity to build the muscles of mindfulness through the repetition of bringing your attention back when it's off course. As we begin to wind down practice, consider giving yourself a pat on the back, a little bit of personal gratitude for having shown up, set with whatever the state of your mind was today. It isn't easy to do this work. It is okay to acknowledge that to yourself, to encourage yourself for the job well done. And begin to look at the fingers or the toes and begin to blink the eyes open as we bring our practice officially to a close today. As the eyes open, you get more information, but see if you can hold your focus with the new things that enter your visual field. Because formal practice and life aren't different places, they're just segmented. We choose to sit here and focus. If you hold that attention, that level of focus, any other time, it still works all the same. So tonight's practice, as I alluded to at the beginning, was influenced by a book called The Art of Possibilities, or The Art of Possibility, which is it's a really good read. It's about reframing and looking at things differently. And some of the themes that we use today were from chapters of that book. And so we started with the breath, really just kind of grounding ourselves there, because that's a universal one. Like, your breath is everywhere you go. And all you need is to pay attention to it, to know that it's there, and you can anchor back to moments of practice or just hold it as a place to focus your attention, in times when the mind might be running amok. Once we went from the breath, I had you kind of move into and settle into this idea around how we measure things in our life. And the idea that our lives are very measured is not something that we're foreign to, but we don't realize that, like, that measurement, it was an invented thing, like it was a made up thing, and we just take it as fact often. And so when we see, or we come to kind of notice or pierce that veil a little bit, we see that there's other ways beyond the traditional means of measurement to kind of look at a situation and to invite in a different frame or a different way of thinking. So I asked you to kind of think about anything that might have been happening in your life recently and seeing if you could find a different perspective around it. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but that was the invitation. And then we brought in the same idea that, along with us measuring things, we also put a lot of stories on top of those things. And sometimes we hold those stories to be inevitably true, and that might not always be the case either. And so that is the fun part about meditation. As we go through these thought experiments and exercises, we can start to poke holes in things that we think are very solid. And then in doing so, we create new possibilities and new opportunities out of that. And then had you touch into and feel into the body, because while I might have you working with your thoughts today like we did, you're still going to be feeling that as a residual. That energy finds its way down and into the body. So I asked you to kind of notice what was happening there with the body and whatnot. And then the final part to kind of wrap everything all together is the idea of just giving yourself credit for good work already. Not something that you have to work towards, but just allowing yourself to already have done, like, to think about it in reverse, like you've already done well and you're just continuing to do well. And so that kind of tied everything together, brought us back to our breath to close us out, and then asked you to give yourself a little bit of gratitude for showing up, because none of this is easy. It is better, though, when you're with a bunch of other people doing it, but it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination.
That's the beauty of it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I invite you to check out my Substack, where we are building a community of like-minded individuals to discuss all topics related to the idea of paying attention. I hope to see you there. But until then, with metta, may you be well.
Like and subscribe.